Well, hi, everybody, and good evening here from Finland. It has been a while since I've been able to get back to the book. The demands of the post-election period and the unexpected by many, response in the transition period has taken a great deal of time. Now, of course, you may be listening to this, if you are listening to this, years and years later, so it may not make much impact, but at the present moment, there is quite an impact. So it seems like every 2 weeks or so I get back to it, and that's not frequently enough. Let's see, as a matter of fact, it was the 28th of November. Well, okay, so this is about 1 week. And we're continuing with searching for what a master is, what the functions are, how to access the master through meditation. I think that is our subject for today. The first point was, who are the masters? And now the second point, in our 8th letter, is concerning access to the masters. And we have to look at the subject. He tells us in 2 ways, briefly from the standpoint of the master and rather lengthily from the viewpoint of the student. I suppose all of us are interested, especially at first, in contacting the master so that our path may be more secure and our knowledge more certain. Of course, later we are told that those who can handle their own affairs without constantly importuning the master are doing him a favor, because he's an extremely busy individual, and it is usually the beginner who is always calling up for the attention of the master. We have in these letters given a broad outline of the magnitude of the task that lies ahead of the man who proposes to attain. It's an extensive task. It's, let's just say, great magnitude. Much that has been written has no interest for the man who is only of average development, but chiefly concerns the man who has reached a specific point in evolution and stands on the path of probation. And I'm sure that as we continue with the Tibetan and year after year study his works and meditate according to his instructions and serve as best we can, as he might indicate, that we have somewhat proven that we are at least on the path of probation, the path of testing. We can see that Scorpio would be an important planet on this, not planet, but sign on this path. Test, trial, and triumph. And there's 3 S's that go with it. I forget all of them, but one is strength, and one is Sagittarian attitudes. Much that might be said upon this matter has been covered in that earlier series I communicated to you. This is one of the earlier books, you know, and those who were part of the development of the arcane school, they received these instructions. And eventually, of course, it became a book. I seek not to cover the same ground here, but to deal more specifically with the internal relationship which exists between the master and the pupil. So often this relationship is a private matter, and it's left to the interaction between the master and the chela. It's really no particular business of anyone but the particular master and chela involved. So, you know, always more is given, which is of value here, beyond just the generalities. That's what I found. It's been a while since I've studied this book, and I remember having the impression long ago that it was no easy book, and that it offered thoughts which required a great deal of pondering. Anyway, that relationship, let's call it the internal relationship between master and pupil, maybe to be a chela is a bit more extensive, a bit more committed than to simply be a chela. That relationship exists in 4 grades, in each of which a man progresses nearer to the master. Now, what does nearer really mean? It's not just physical proximity, although some of that, or at least psychological proximity, will be found. It's something, it's a vibratory response, a vibratory sensitivity. The more heightened that sensitivity to the vibration of the master, we might say then, the nearer the pupil to the master. So heightened receptivity, heightened receptivity or heightened sensitivity to the master is nearness. Okay. These 4 grades are as follows, and cover the period wherein the man is under training until he himself becomes an adept. Now, we might compare these 4 to the 6 stages of discipleship, which are carried forward, brought to our attention at the end of Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1. And they comprise, if I remember, little chelaship, chela in the light, accepted chelaship, chela on the thread, chela in the aura, chela in the master's heart, that's the 6th, and then maybe a 7th, which involves a special blending of the lights. And the chela has become, by that point, the master himself. Okay. So, but now he's going to offer us 4 grades and not 6. So we'll see what they are. A, the period when he is on probation, wherein he is on probation. And this this extends even beyond the first initiation. Oftentimes we have a different sequence. We say the accepting disciple, the the pledged disciple, and then the accepted disciple. And sometimes we just use the word disciple. A disciple is a category which is beyond that of the aspirant or probationer. And since we're told every true aspirant has taken the first initiation, then certainly the disciple has done so. But if we want to compress all this, we simply say there is the aspirant, and the advancing aspirant becomes the probationer willing to be tested. And that takes us even beyond the first initiation. And the probationer, without looking at such category as the pledged disciple, becomes the accepted disciple. So this is a bit compressed, and it doesn't elaborate on smaller stages. Then letter B, the period wherein he is an accepted disciple, and we might say often between, during the latter part of the interval between the first initiation and the second initiation. And then, so this is a very general kind of statement of the 4 stages. Elsewhere, he goes into greater detail, and you could lay out some kind of chart which would have these lesser categories involved. The period wherein he is regarded as the master's intimate, or is esoterically termed the son of the master. And this might include in the aura and in the master's heart. And, well, that last phase, not much is said about it, except it is kind of a 7th. And the period, maybe we're going to have to take that master's heart stage and put it down here. The period wherein the final 3 initiations are taken, and he knows himself as one with the master. The final 3, presumably, probably the 3rd initiation, 4th initiation, and 5th initiation. So it covers quite a range, but at least the 3rd initiation would be included. It would involve 3rd initiation, and we might say Chela in the aura of the master. So he knows himself as one with the Master. So that's a special stage of identification, a special stage of identification. He ranks then as the beloved of the Master, a position analogous to that which John, the beloved disciple, held in the Bible story. Perhaps, sorry. Perhaps the beloved of the Master is the Chela. Sorry, within the Master's heart. Though probably found in the next category. I don't think we can make all of these categories line up perfectly. He seems to address them differently in the different books, and quite a bit of detail in discipleship in the New Age, with the 6 or 7 stages of discipleship. So was John, the beloved disciple, a disciple within the Master's heart? Maybe so. It's not meant to indicate any kind of sentimental relationship. It's technical. And I suppose it has to do, yes, with the heart center, but also with the 4th initiation impending. Something like that. So the first one is on probation, and then accepted disciple, and then the Master's intimate, and this would be beyond the 3rd initiation, or at that time, and then the final 3 initiations. I suppose 3, 4, and 5, because after all, we are dealing with a Master, unless we're dealing with a Chohan, and then the final 3 would be 4, 5, 6, but we don't seem to be mentioning Chohans here particularly. Anyway, when it comes to assessing where we stand, many of us may be working on the category of accepted disciples, such as were the students that Master DK was teaching, some 50 or 51 of them, and the majority of them became accepted disciples. I suppose the fact that the Master undertook their instruction, even in the first phase of that instruction with the seed group work, I suppose that means that they were accepted disciples, but certainly after dropping a few because they had reached their high water mark, the rest were reorganized into the reorganized seed group of 24, a shambolic number, and they became accepted disciples. Even a disciple who had become thus for his own protection. He had not yet taken the first initiation, which is certainly the exception to the rule. All right, so these are the 4 categories as given in this book, and compare these with the 4 stages of 6 stages of discipleship, and you have Chela. Well, we have little Chelaship. We should memorize these, of course. Chela in the light, accepted discipleship, Chela on the thread. He can contact the master, put up a call, and a response will be forthcoming. It doesn't take a lot of energy from the master. Chela in the master's aura, Chela in the master's heart. Whoop. Let's learn to type. And finally, the blending of the lights, the seventh stage, where basically the Chela has become the master. Well, all of these grades, they do lie ahead of us. We must not have an ambitious attitude, because that would mean that we were focused upon the personality and the very foundational requirement of love and service and altruism. Such an attitude would be missing. We'd just be more interested, ambitiously interested in our own spiritual status, which would prevent true progress. It's a bit like that sighting of the door of initiation, and you try to run through yourself all alone. You can't do it because the door is too narrow. But when you take your brother's hand on either side and are part of a group, then miraculously the whole group goes through together without the kind of problem that is presented to the ambitious type. There's no fooling the judgment which lies behind all this. If we serve, if we spread the light, if we love, if we carry out the will to good as much as may be possible for us, then possibilities open before us and not otherwise. Now, all these stages, he says, are governed by 2 things: similarity of vibration and karma. And we'll see how he describes this. I mean, people at the same stage of unfoldment do have a quite close similarity of vibration within their vehicles, and I suppose within their causal body. And certain types of karma have to be fulfilled. We may think of something we've done amiss even millions of years ago, but the karma for that kind of infraction occurs much closer to the source of the action. And we don't expect to find karma for those misdeeds occurring now, millions of years later. So all these stages are governed by two things, and all are involved in the ability of the man, I assume, not TIE, the ability of the man to develop group consciousness, because let's just say that the higher stages of discipleship pertain to the pupil who is developing group consciousness. And unless a certain amount of that I am the group, consideration of the group, not just selfish consideration, is present in the consciousness, then some of these higher categories simply are not possible. So this is the Aquarian age into which we are entering, and that is the sign of group consciousness. And our progress depends very much on how we consider the group. On the planes of the higher mind, maybe subplanes, on the second subplane, you have a reflection of what can be seen on the highest planes of the solar system. And what do you have there? Well, what do you find, first of all, on the second subplane? On the second subplane, you find the egoic lotus of, let's say, first degree initiates and beyond, until the destruction of the causal body. Egoic lotus, causal body. Maybe when we call it the causal body, we're thinking more of the radiation and the general oval shape, and the egoic lotus as a term is maybe a more detailed term. And the different parts, the different petals, the different colors are understood in greater detail. What are the highest planes of our solar system? Well, I suppose perhaps Atma and monadic and logoic. Those three might be considered the higher, or maybe even simply the highest two, which are the esoteric subplanes. All the others pertaining from Atma on down, they pertain to Brahma and to the third aspect, which is considered external. What have you there? The seven heavenly men are there to be found, each of whom is composed from the standpoint of form of group souls, those group souls being made up of the individual and angel units of consciousness. Well, I wonder if we could take a quick look at one of the maps and maybe find what he's talking about. And the way we would do that, let's see. we'd go to this one. Yeah. And perhaps what we'd see here is a sevenfoldness, which represent the seven major planetary logoi. But also, we cannot dispense with the three basic minor planetary logoi, Earth, Mars, and Pluto. And then when we go to the logoic plane, we will have the three persons of the solar logoic trinity. And, you know, you can also make a case for the idea that three synthesizing planets find their place there. So let's see. We find seven heavenly men. And, you know, they are found on the the highest planes. Now, what does he mean by that? I mean, I suppose we might say, or maybe not the atmic plane, but only the monadic and logoic. Those are truly the esoteric planes, and as we saw in our diagram, the different greater beings are listed there particularly. The 7 and the 3, a kind of a Kabbalistic formation. And if the 3 synthesizing planets were somehow listed on the logoic plane, then we would have room for all the remaining sacred and major non-sacred planets, the ones we are familiar with. There's just so much about cosmology and the structure of our solar system that about which we are still in the dark. I mean, the whole idea that there are 115 something planets emerging and withdrawing, taking on incarnation, leaving incarnation, and a great many asteroids which each have their effect. And what about comets and so forth? There's just a lot we don't know about the function and dynamics of life within our solar system. But anyway, those 7 triangles can be looked at as 7 heavenly men in whom monads have their place, and also something less. There are groups of monads, you know, page 39 of this book, Letters on Occult Meditation. There are, you know, groups of monads, 7 great groups, but there are also these other groups found, I think 2 of them on the atmic plane. Let's check it. And how many on the Buddhic plane? Maybe 2 again. Let's take a look. We'll go to page 39. Yeah. And we'll see 1 on the atmic plane. And on the atomic subplane, 14 of them. But 2 on the Buddhic plane, on the first subplane where even a master does not really focus, it's too high. And then on the third subplane, 28 groups. And on the mental plane, three groupings of 49 groups, 42 groups, 35 groups, depending on the subplane. And all of these lesser groupings are really within somehow the 7 great groups on the monadic plane. Okay. Now let's see, I hope I didn't really show that to you, and there it is. The 7 great groups, the 14 atomic groups, which are atmic, the 21 and 28 groups, which are Buddhic, and then the 49 groups, 42 groups, and 35 groups, which pertain to the higher part of the mental plane. And it would be very interesting to see how these groups coalesce and how the 49 groups become the 42 groups, how the 42 groups become the 35 groups, and the 35, the 28, and 28, the 21, and the 21, the 14, and the 14 groups, ethnic groups, originating from the 7 great groups on the monadic plane. But somehow the great groups contain all the others. Okay. Now, you know, DK goes only so far, leaving much to our capacity to interpret hints when he deals with these charts. Not everything is meticulously spelled out, but, you know, maybe enough is given so that we can get the general structure. So, although the 7 great groups contain monads, they also, as we go down and think of what they include on lower planes, they include group souls, and that's what we've been looking at. Groups of triads, I suppose, when dealing with the Atmic and Buddhic plane, groups of triads. And then when dealing maybe with the first sub-level of the mental plane, we might be talking about triads as well, because maybe the causal body does not extend in fullness, at least, that far. But when dealing with the second and third subplanes of the mental plane, then we will have not just groups of triads or groups of monads, we will have groups of egoic lotuses. And all of this is testimony to the tremendous organization that goes into the structure, whereby the higher aspects of man continue to progress. And these group souls, what does it say? Made up of the individual human and angel units of consciousness. So wherever we're going to find the human triads, we may well find the angelic triads. They certainly, let's put it like this, angels are monads as well. And in those big 7 circles, we will find angel units as well as human monadic units. And we don't exactly know yet how they are divided in terms of numbers. Sometimes it seems necessary that we would have to have, if 6/7 of incarnated, of units, let's say human units, are out of incarnation, then the total would have to be pretty big. Because let's just say that, what would it be, 60 billion might be a number that would apply to the human units as a totality, might be. But then elsewhere he seems to suggest that the 60 billion applies to the solar system as a whole. So that is left a little bit in the dark. If we find that we have 6 or 7 billion incarnated human units, then let's say 6 billion or 7 billion represents 1/7. And you'd have to have 7 times 7 to reach a figure like 49 billion for the entire grouping of humanity on this planet. Now, that would take up so many of the allotted 60 billion units or monads in our solar system as to leave very few for other planets. So there's something there that needs adjustment. 60,000 million, we call it 60 billion, or maybe some people call it milliard. That's a figure often associated with the human monads on all planets and throughout the solar system. I think you see the problem. It comes when we compare that particular number with the idea that at any one time only 1/7 of the human units are actually in incarnation, and the other 6/7 are out of incarnation. Well, we'll solve it as we go. On the second subplane of the mental plane, you have the groups belonging to the masters, if I may so express it. Now, these are, remember, this was written before there was this general movement of masters, groups, and collections of egos to the Buddhic plane. That happened more around the year 1925 and following. So the groupings of souls or groupings of causal bodies did occur on the higher mental plane, especially subplane 2. If the units were in any way advanced. And these groups on the second subplane, with their particular power called response to group vibration, were the groups under the direct supervision of the masters. Now, you could ask ourselves, where right now are our causal bodies found? And since every true aspirant has taken the first initiation, and at the time of the first initiation, there is a vibratory movement from the third subplane of the higher mental plane to the second, I would say that as causal bodies, as egoic lotuses, we are found grouped on the second subplane. But that doesn't mean that we're not incorporated into ashrams, which are more like collections of triads. That we do have a kind of a transcendental home in the spiritual triad, even while we may be still supporting an egoic lotus. So especially in the second ray grouping, second ray ashrams, there is movement. I suppose maybe in the 246 line, there is movement of the ashram to the spiritual triad. And we, in some manner of speaking, will find ourselves there, as well as on the second subplane of the higher mental plane. So on the second subplane of the mental plane, where heart centers are located, you have the groups belonging to the masters. Maybe not all, because some first-ray masters may have, well, it just depends on how far the person has progressed. There will be triadal activity, triadal attempted focus before there is the destruction of the causal bodies. So via the antakarana, triadal attention will be occurring, and yet there will be an egoic lotus in such cases until the fourth degree is reached. Okay, these groups are animated and vitalized from the atomic subplane, where the masters, when manifesting for the helping of the sons of men, have their habitat. Now, maybe we're going to see something additional here. If we can just find what page we're on. Okay, 266 it looks like. So if we go into letters on occult meditation, and we look at page 266, we will find an asterisk about the habitat of the masters. Okay, yeah, 1920, really, not 1925. That's a new piece of information for me. Since 1920, great changes have occurred. Now, 1949, I suppose it takes place over time, there has been a shift to the Buddhic plane. So much of the master's groupings, which were found on the higher mental plane, have been shifted without the causal body, more like a triadal presence, onto the Buddhic plane. And here it gives the 1920, the year in which all of this, so much of these letters were being written, as a time when that shift had not yet taken place. Well, these are hierarchical matters, you know. And let's see here. Oop. Yeah. Okay. I'm not doing too well here. I think I'll just pause it. Basically, we have shifts which are vibratory enhancements. Consciousness and the energy system are stabilized at ever higher points of tension. The only difference or fundamental difference between the higher mental plane and the Buddhic plane has to do with the frequency of the matter which is found on those two planes and their respective subplanes. So a shift is a change of frequency. And I think I'll have to put that down. A shift is a change of frequency. Okay, so these groups are animated and vitalized from the atomic subplane, and I suppose of the higher mental plane, where the masters, when manifesting for the helping of the sons of men, have their habitat or focus, but now there's been a shift onto the Buddhic plane, where the ashrams are really found. But let's remember that if we have not taken the fourth initiation, we still will have a causal body, even though we may be in the master's aura and participating in that shift. So then we will have two centers of focus. Anyway, I had the idea that 1925 was an appropriate time for the shift, but Alice Bailey takes it, at least the beginnings of it, even earlier. Just as the heavenly men have their originating source and the cause of their life on the atomic plane of the solar system, that which we call the plane of Adi, or the first plane. So there's an analogy there. Animation for the individual man occurring on the first subplane at first of the higher mental plane, and later from some location on the Buddhic plane, not too high, I suspect, because the individual would never be able to get in touch with that high level if a master cannot even polarize there. But then the analogy takes us into the larger picture. I just want to make sure that we see this. And then we have the heavenly man being animated from the first cosmic subplane, which is the logoic plane, or the plane of Adi. Now, these are just words, of course, and one day we will experience the energies involved. These groups are formed around a master who, it has been said, play the part of the monad to their ashrams. So these groups are formed around a master, are enclosed within his aura. So let's call that the, in a way, one of the boundaries of the ashram. and are part of his consciousness. Now, this is important. These groups that are found on the second subplane, or at least at the time of this writing, of the higher mental plane, but then later at some point, perhaps some etheric point, on the Buddhic plane. And when you look at a sevenfold subplane structure for any plane, the first four of the subplanes are considered etheric. So maybe that's where the impulse is coming from. But anyway, there's an inclusive aspect going on here, and the master holds and embraces different individuals in these various groups. And this is the important sentence: they include people whose egoic ray is the same as his, or whose monadic ray is the same. Now let's see what DK actually means by that. What is the master's ray? How is he functioning? Well, if he's functioning as a master, he's functioning on his soul ray. So, as a master, the master functions on his soul ray. As a Chohan, he would begin to function on his monadic ray. So if, for instance, one has a second ray soul and you're dealing with a second ray soul of a master, which means largely a second ray triad, 2, page 177, 176, and 177 of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, that type of similarity will make for an important sustained studential relationship. The individual will remain the student of that particular master. Individual has a certain soul ray, and it's the same soul ray as the master. But what it also appears, since the master is functioning on his soul ray more than on his monadic ray, that which can come a little later, then if the monadic ray of the individual is the same as the master's soul ray, that would also be set up conditions for a sustained, profitable relationship. So I'll put that down. If the monadic ray of the student, pupil, is the same as the soul ray of the master, then another similarity of relationship is set up. Now, I suppose it's pretty much the case that there were some people that were really studying strongly with Master DK. They were first ray souls, but they apparently had the second ray monad, which was the same as the soul ray of the master. So, for instance, a second ray soul found in the student would correlate with the second ray monad found in the student would correlate with the second ray soul of the master. You know, it's interesting to see who comes and who goes. People begin with a certain degree of enthusiasm, and they find that in time they cannot really continue. It's because maybe of dissimilarity of vibration. I think there was one student who had a very strong overstimulation issue, and this person had, I think, a sixth ray personality, a seventh ray soul, and it looked like a first ray monad. Well, those were just not the rays which correlated with the rays of Master DK. I mean, he could teach this person something, but the person could not abide the vibration, did not have that kind of similarity to the Master's rays, which would sustain that individual as a student of the Master. And there may have been some others. In general, I think there were a couple of seventh ray souls in Master DK's groups, and neither one of them made it through. I believe there were a couple of third ray souls. One of them was very persistent, even though highly glamored, and seemed to stay with it for a long time, but had trouble. Nevertheless, abided. There was another third ray student, and I don't think that he made the cut. Third ray soul, sixth ray personality, fifth ray mind, sixth ray astral body, and third ray physical body. He abided, and he was of a high mind, but I don't think he made the cut when DK reorganized the group. When it came to sixth ray souls, and there were a couple that were making transition, one of them did quit, even though he had rays which could have been considered correlated with Master DK, because Master DK alternatively addressed him as a sixth ray soul who's really a second ray soul. He was in process. But he was the first ray monad, and his pride got in the way of continuance. When we look back, it seems a shame, but in the heat of the moment, I suppose one can feel, as absurd as it is, somewhat misunderstood or persecuted by the Master. Another individual was highly critical, of a highly critical nature. She was a sixth ray soul, but again, in process of transference, and I'm trying to remember, I think her name was HSD, and I don't remember exactly what happened to her, but in general, the ones that abided were those on the second ray, and especially those on the second ray, and a fair presence of those on the first ray. And he did say that most occult groups at the present time are consisting of second and first ray souls. There were no fourth ray souls or fifth ray souls in his group as far as I can divine on that subject. So, you know, it's interesting to consider who had the energy, the correspondence, the similarity of vibration that would allow continuance. Okay, and this person that I would be looking for, if I can find it, it would be in discipleship. Maybe HSD. Well, that's not going to be so good. HSD. Well, there's definitely someone there, but I don't know why it's not showing. Maybe we have to look at this from volume 2. HSD, otherwise I just give up. So she came in and out. Here it tells us that she has again taken her place among you, having learnt some measure of inner calm and mental poise. Here he summarizes the work of certain disciples. It would have been most interesting to know them in person. But I guess she didn't go on. I guess she didn't make the cut. Many of those who have been given the opportunity to work with me have had some relationship with me over past lives, and because of certain activities have warranted the opportunity to work in still closer relationship. They have proved by working off karma. Such were HSD and SSP. Now I know that SSP, who interestingly was Dale Carnegie's brother, you know, How to Win Friends and Influence People, he did not make the cut, and maybe HSD did not either. Okay, and it looks like HSD as a sixth ray soul, still in process of changing to the second ray, was not able to go further. And here her name is mentioned again in a visualization, and I guess the question is, can she be found elsewhere? Because these seem to be instructions that are for everybody and are not the particularly personal instructions. And let's see. And just to continue this is a note on HSD, a sixth ray soul becoming a second. You know, that's what I'm trying to show, that some rays had an easier time in Master DK's group or groups. It says here, it will be apparent from the above instruction that the disciple was temporarily suspended from active work in the group until certain lessons had been learned, but reinstatement followed. Okay, so it was in that sense, a kind of success story. And if we go to page, we'll switch books and go to page 724, Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2. Let's see here. No, that's not going to be it. And here we also have a continuation of HSD in Discipleship 2, and she appears to be maintaining her position. As he says, a future of service opens wide for you if, I repeat, you are willing to do the little things and finish what you begin. She was apparently, fairly agitated type of person. My blessing and my love for you, the love of a master for his disciple, distant and close, remote yet near, is ever yours. And so there was nothing about dismissal here or the need for reinstatement. Let's try one more. Well, I think there was simply one dismissal and one reinstatement. And in the beginning of Dinah 2, it tells us what happened to SSP and HSD. But SSP was a second ray soul. He just had reached his high water mark, and HSD was the sixth ray soul in process of transference, and she needed to correct certain habits. Anyway, my point in all of this is that the seventh ray souls, the third ray souls, the sixth ray souls all had some difficulty when working in Master DK's groups. The second ray souls and first ray souls seem to have had greater success. So I did explain who it is that seems to persist with Master DK, and they were those who had the same soul ray as he had, because a master still works on his soul ray, even though the monadic ray is becoming stronger and stronger. You see, he's still a human being at the fifth initiation. As a Chohan, we can say, they are no longer men as are the masters. That's in one of the rules. So at the acme of being the human being, he is still working on his soul ray, however much it may be influenced by his monadic ray. But certainly the soul vibration seems, I would say, sufficient to deal with his up-and-coming students. And when they have the same soul ray as his, it's resonant, it's easier. And when their monadic ray is the same as his soul ray, this is my present interpretation at least, then there is also a line of resonance which sustains the relationship. You know, sometimes you're going to find, well, people I know, they don't have the second ray soul, more likely the first ray soul, but they have the second ray monad, and they do accordingly work with Master DK, even though that is not their ashramic home, we might say. There was, well, there were two individuals, both of whom had, we can deduce, first-ray monads, and hence it was considered that Master Morya was really their home master. But they did, each one of them, either have the second-ray soul or a sixth-ray soul quite close to becoming a second-ray soul. There was one man, ISGL, that Master DK addressed as a second-ray soul, even though he had not completed the transition. Okay, well, that's a bit of a digression, but he goes on and says, this means that two types of people are concerned. And what are they concerned with? These groups are formed around a master, are enclosed within his aura, and are part of his consciousness. And what is the personnel? The egoic ray is the same as his, or whose monadic ray is the same. This means two types of people are concerned to be included in that way. Those who are preparing for the first and second initiations taken on the ray of the ego. Now, there's a contradiction there somewhere, because sometimes it tells us that even the third initiation is taken on the ray of the ego. So we have to bear that in mind. In some references, we are told that the third initiation is taken also on the ray of the ego, and in another reference, that the third initiation is taken on the ray of the monad. Now, both references exist. Let's see if we can find them. And if not, maybe you'll have to take my my word for it. Those who are preparing for the next two initiations, well, there it is, which are taken on the ray of the monad. I've always found this to be a very interesting section, and I'll kind of make this red, anyway, because we're dealing with the will. So initiations 3 and 4, taken apparently on the ray of the monad. And yet, there's no question that the third initiation does involve very much the soul ray or the ray of the ego. So, and then here he says something interesting. You have here a cause of the transference of people from one ray to another, or, kind of, what can we say, a new kind of emphasis from the egoic ray to the monadic ray. It is only an apparent transference, even though it entails passing into the group of a different master. And the master whose ray is the same as the monadic ray of the pupil or chela. So, how to explain that? You're a second ray soul, and you've been taking the first and second initiations in the uh, in connection with the ashram of the master whose soul ray is the same as your soul ray. But then, according to this at least, you pass increasingly onto the ray of your monad as you take the third initiation. Actually, I think it's, kind of both are operating together. But we have, let's say you have a third ray monad. You would, because of that monad, pass into a different master's group whose soul ray was the same as your monadic ray. I think there's a greater likelihood there than that his monadic ray was the same as your monadic ray, because he's at the third degree. It's only the very beginning of monadic interplay. So that's the question. People having taken the first and second initiation, they begin to feel a kind of change in quality in their consciousness. Their monadic ray is preparing them to take the third initiation according to this particular layout. And so they find themselves being transferred for supervision into the group of a different master. I think that would be one way to look at it. And this takes place after the second initiation. So I find this to be very important, because probably a number of us know people who have taken the second degree and who maybe undergo, maybe after the temptations in the desert, after passing those temptations as the Christ did on a much higher turn of the spiral, find a different quality emerging. Maybe you know some people like that. Maybe there are instances where you find that in yourself. So this is really an important idea. And it's kind of like those changes of quality, which are so telling. It is the esoteric or occult dynamics behind the changes of quality. And all of these types of people are enclosed within the master's group or ashram. It must have been very interesting to know with certainty the rays of the people with whom one was associated, as was the case when Master DK was teaching through Alice Bailey certain people whose rays he had ascertained and whose rays he then shared with them. Then you could be sure of what you were seeing, and you could make note and see the behavior, the dynamics of such people. Right now, we're still having to guess a little, intelligent, educated guesses or estimations, because the master is not present as he was through Alice Bailey to confirm. So here, page 266, 267, a section that I consider to be very important, and informing us of some of the subtle ray dynamics which, who knows, we may be experiencing. Okay. Now we seem to be beginning a new section here. We're talking about access to the master. And this, of course, is an example of access, isn't it? Suppose you're working with Master DK on the second ray for the first and second initiations, but your monadic ray is really the first. So at a certain point, be following the second initiation and maybe even following the choice in the desert, you feel that first ray coming in, which is the ray of your monad, and you feel a gravitation towards a different master's group whose soul ray may be the same as your first ray monad. See, what I've basically said is that at this stage of evolution that we're talking about, it's the soul ray of the master that counts. And even though for the master, the monad is a powerful influence, so is the remaining soul ray, and he's probably dealing with you more on his soul ray than he is on his personality ray. For instance, Master DK, at least I'm making the assumption that he is a second ray soul, and that's largely how he's dealing with his students. At the same time, he may well have a third ray monad, and for some, he may deal with them on the monad, but for the great majority of people, what appears to me at least to be a third ray monad is not his main method of reaching and educating people. Okay. Now I'm going to have a different program for the next one. I think that might be the wise thing to do. We have the probationer's 3 objects, and we have moved to page 267. And we've really gone from 265 to 267. So I'll take it down here, and I'll also say, whoop, I don't think we needed to go quite that far, did we? No. So we went as far as 267. And our date was the 5th. Okay, good. And now, just to settle in before getting into our next section, we ended page 53, program 53, and our date was the 5th of December. And we went from 265 to 267. And we'll begin with program number 54 at our earliest convenience. And it will be from 267 onward. And since things are so uncertain, I'll just put XX there for when we do that. Okay, friends, we're thinking slowly, thinking carefully, offering solutions which can help us discover where we are on the path and what kinds of changes of dynamics we might expect as we move along. So many of us are probationers in a certain sense, and therefore the next section will be of interest to us. We cannot rush into an overestimation of our abilities. He tells us that the beginner is always more consciously conceited than the more experienced disciple. So this whole question about fixating on what might be my status, all of that is relatively unimportant at first until we gain the larger picture. So thank you, and we'll move on before long. Okay. Bye for now. Many blessings. Lots of love. Okay.